Picture this. You're standing in a cave in Morocco. It's roughly 300,000 years ago. Across from you is someone who has your face. Not close to your face, your face. Same forehead height, same delicate cheekbones, same jaw. If you passed them on the street tomorrow in jeans and a hoodie, you wouldn't look twice. Now here's the unsettling part. That person isn't fully human, not the way we usually mean it, because underneath that familiar face, their skull curves back into a long, low, almost alien shape. Completely unlike ours. They've got no jewelry, no cave paintings, no evidence of burying their dead. As far as we can tell, they're not doing a single thing we'd call culture. So which is it? Are they human because they've got our face? Or are they not human because they don't have anything else going on that looks like us? That question has been living rent-free in my head for about 2 weeks now, because the deeper I went, the more I realized I had no idea what I was actually asking. I thought, when did humans become human? Had a clean answer, a date, a fossil, a line you could point to on a timeline and say, there, that's the moment. It does not even close. And the real answer is stranger, messier, and honestly kind of humbling. Let's start with the obvious assumption, the one I walked in with. Humans became human when Homo sapiens showed up. Simple, right? New species, new humans, done. So when did that happen? For decades, the textbook answer was East Africa, about 200,000 years ago. Then in 2017, a team excavating an old barite mine in Morocco called Jebel Irhoud redated a skull that had been sitting in a drawer since the 1960s, originally misidentified as a Neanderthal. Turns out it wasn't a Neanderthal, it was one of us. And it wasn't 200,000 years old. It was somewhere between 280,000 and 300,000 years old. That single discovery pushed the origin of our species back by over 100,000 years in one afternoon, which is the kind of thing that should honestly happen more often in a field with this few artifacts to work with. But here's the part that actually stopped me. The Jebel Irhoud skulls have a completely modern face. Flat, short, tucked neatly under the brain case, exactly like yours. But the brain case itself, the actual container for the brain, is long and low and archaic, closer in shape to something you'd expect from a much older, more primitive hominin. In other words, the first Homo sapiens looked like us from the neck down and from the eyebrows forward, but their brains were still catching up to a shape ours wouldn't fully reach for another 100,000 years or more. Evolution built the face first and finished the brain later, which raises an actual uncomfortable question. If you don't have the brain shape yet, but you've got the face, are you human? And if the answer is no, then who exactly gets to draw that line? I didn't have an answer, so I kept going. My next thought was, okay, forget the skull shape. Maybe humanity isn't about how you look. Maybe it's about what you can do. Tools. Surely tools are the marker. Only humans make tools, except that's not even a little bit true. And it hasn't been true for a very long time. Homo habilis, a small-brained hominin that's barely even related to our own branch, was chipping stone flakes into cutting edges 2.5 million years ago. Chimpanzees strip leaves off twigs to fish termites out of mounds. Crows bend wire into hooks in laboratory experiments with zero training. Sea otters keep a favorite rock tucked in a pouch of skin under their arm, specifically for cracking open shellfish. Tool use, it turns out, is embarrassingly common across the animal kingdom. It's not the line. It never was. Okay, fine. What about fire? Controlling fire feels like a bigger deal. You need cause and effect. You need to maintain it, protect it from wind and rain. Surely that's more exclusively us. The earliest solid evidence of controlled fire use comes from a site called Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, dated to roughly 1 million years ago. Burnt bone, burnt plant ash, deep inside a cave where nothing accidental could have started it. Real, deliberate, maintained fire. The species using it wasn't Homo sapiens. It was Homo erectus. Smaller brains than us, heavier brows, extinct roughly 100,000 years ago, having never once picked up a paintbrush or buried a body that we know of. And this is where it got genuinely strange for me, because Homo erectus wasn't done surprising archaeologists. At a site called Trinil, on the island of Java, researchers found a fossilized freshwater mussel shell with a deliberate zigzag pattern carved into it, not a scratch, not damage, a clean, repeated, intentional zigzag, dated to somewhere around 500,000 years ago. 500,000 years ago. That's roughly 200,000 years before our own species even existed. Something without our brain shape, without our face, without language as far as anyone can prove, sat down at some point and carved a pattern into a shell, because it apparently wanted to. I don't know what to do with that fact, except sit with it uncomfortably, which is exactly what I did for the rest of this rabbit hole. At this point I figured, alright, Tools are out, fire is out, even doodling is apparently out. What about death? Surely the way we treat our dead is uniquely us. Grief, ritual, burial. That has to be the line. This is where things get genuinely controversial, and I mean scientists publicly arguing in journals controversial. In the Rising Star Cave system in South Africa, researchers have spent years pulling out the remains of a species called Homo naledi. Small brain, roughly a third the size of ours, primitive shoulders and hips. And yet the bodies were found deep inside a cave system so difficult to access that researchers had to recruit people specifically small enough to fit through the passages. In 2023, the team leading the excavation published papers claiming something huge, that Homo naledi deliberately carried their dead deep into the cave, dug pits, buried the bodies, and even engraved geometric patterns onto the surrounding rock walls, all somewhere between 335,000 and 241,000 years ago. If true, that would make a small brain species that isn't even us responsible for the oldest deliberate burial and the oldest engravings on the planet, older than anything Homo sapiens has left behind. Naturally, other researchers looked at the same evidence and said, not so fast. A separate team published a rebuttal arguing the pits could be natural geological features and the engravings could be scratches from animal claws or simple erosion. As of right now, there's no consensus. It's genuinely, actively unresolved. But notice what's actually being argued about here. Nobody's debating whether Homo naledi could have done this because they weren't smart enough by our usual standards. The debate is purely about the physical evidence. That alone tells you something. We used to assume big brains were required for this kind of behavior. Now the argument isn't about whether a small brain can do it, it's just about whether it did. Then there's art, and this is the chapter that genuinely rearranged something in my head. For a long time, the oldest known drawing belonged to us, and only us. In 2018, researchers announced a 73,000-year-old ochre crayon drawing found in Blombos Cave in South Africa. 9 cross-hatched red lines on a small stone, deliberately drawn by an early Homo sapiens. It predated the previous oldest known drawings by roughly 30,000 years, and for a while it stood as clean, satisfying proof. Symbolic art. Us. Confirmed. Except that same year, a completely different team published something that quietly demolished the idea that art was ours alone. In 3 caves scattered across Spain, La Pasiega, Maltravieso, and Ardales, researchers used uranium-thorium dating on the mineral crust that had formed on top of ancient cave paintings. That crust could only have formed after the paint went on the wall, which means it gives you a minimum age. The paintings underneath, ladder shapes, hand stencils, red pigment splattered and blown onto stone, dated back at least 64,000 years. In Maltravieso specifically, one hand stencil came back at a minimum of nearly 67,000 years. Here's the problem. Modern humans didn't arrive in that part of Europe until roughly 20,000 years after those paintings were made. The only species around to paint them was Neanderthals. Sit with that for a second, because I had to. We spent the better part of 2 centuries treating Neanderthals as the lumbering, dim-witted footnote to our own success story. The word Neanderthal is still used as an insult, and yet, decades before a single Homo sapiens set foot in Spain, Neanderthals were climbing deep into pitch-black cave systems, carrying fire for light, mixing pigment, and deliberately marking walls with symbols that meant something to them. They were also, it turns out, stringing perforated seashells into jewelry roughly 115,000 years ago, in a cave in what's now southeastern Spain, at a point when no Homo sapiens had gotten anywhere near the region. They weren't copying us. They physically couldn't have been. We weren't there yet. 2 separate species, on 2 separate continents, arrived at the same idea independently. Mark a surface. Wear something decorative. Make meaning out of material that serves no survival purpose whatsoever. And somehow we'd spent generations treating that exact behavior as the one thing that made us special. By this point, I'd knocked out every marker I originally thought counted. Tools, not unique to us, not even unique to our genus. Fire, older than our species. Burial, possibly older than our species and still disputed. Art and symbolic decoration, shared with a completely different species that went extinct 40,000 years ago. And that's when I realized the question I started with was broken. When did we become human assumes there's a single switch somewhere, a moment where a hominin went to sleep as an animal and woke up as a person. But every single piece of evidence points somewhere else entirely. It wasn't a switch, it was a scatter. Fire showed up in one lineage, engraving showed up in another, 500,000 years earlier than anyone expected. Burial possibly showed up in a third, small-brained branch most people have never even heard of. Art turned up independently in two separate species that hadn't shared a common ancestor with behaviorally modern traits for hundreds of thousands of years. None of these traits arrived together. None of them arrived only in us. Being human, in the way we actually mean it when we say it, was never a single ingredient. It was a pile of separate ingredients that different branches of our family tree picked up at different times, in different places, for reasons we're still arguing about in academic journals right now, this week, while you're watching this. So if it wasn't tools, or fire, or burial, or art on their own, what's actually left? What's the one thing that's genuinely, verifiably different about the branch of the family tree that made it all the way to you, sitting here right now? Here's the closest thing to an answer I found. It's not any single behavior. It's what happened to those behaviors afterward. Homo erectus carved one zigzag into one shell that we found 500,000 years ago, and then, as far as the record shows, nothing built on top of it. No second shell, no tradition. It happened, and then it stopped happening. Neanderthals painted in caves for tens of thousands of years, developed real technique, and then their entire species disappeared roughly 40,000 years ago, taking whatever tradition they'd built with them. Our branch did something different. We took a behavior, and instead of it dying with the person who invented it, we passed it to the next person. That person built on it slightly, passed a slightly better version to the next person. Generation after generation, a small improvement layered on top of the last one, compounding instead of resetting. That's not a moment in time. There's no fossil for it, no single date you can circle on a chart. It's a pattern that only becomes visible when you zoom out far enough to watch stone flakes slowly turn into steel, watch a single ochre crosshatch slowly turn into oil paint, watch a grunt slowly turn into the sentence you're listening to right now. It's cumulative, it compounds, and it never stopped compounding, not even for a single generation, all the way from Blombos Cave to whatever screen you're watching this on. So when did ancient humans become human? Honestly, after all of this, I don't think that's a question with a date attached to it anymore. I think it's a question with a direction attached to it. Something that started scattered across half a dozen different species in half a dozen different places, and slowly, unevenly, accidentally, started sticking. But here's what's actually been keeping me up since I went down this hole. If becoming human was never one moment, if it was just behavior after behavior getting picked up, kept, and passed down generation after generation without ever fully finishing, then what makes anyone think we're finished now? We're still picking things up, still passing them down, still compounding, which means the honest answer to when did humans become human might just be we haven't stopped yet. If this rabbit hole got you thinking, subscribe, because we've got a lot more of these to dig through. I'll see you in the next one.